Hello, everyone, and happy week 11. I've got one start and one sit per position, as well as three players that you can put into your flex spot this week to win your matchup. It's going to be a good one, so buckle up. We have, at the quarterback position, we are going to be firing up Jameis Winston against the Saints. This is just the revenge game narrative, right? Jameis Winston cut loose by the Saints, lands in Cleveland, never really given a true chance in New Orleans. You know, they had the whole like Andy Dalton thing, as if Andy Dalton's any better than Winston. And, well, I just think he's going to take it out on them. We've seen some great performances from Jameis Winston heading into the bye week, especially in terms of the volume. Right, against Baltimore was a much better game. 300 pass yards, 3 passing touchdowns, no interceptions, finishes the QB 10 on the week. And then against the Chargers, it was a lot worse. Only had 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions, but that's the Jameis Winston experience. He's still throwing the ball over 40 times a game. And against the Saints defense, who ranks 28th in yards allowed and 24th in points allowed, and especially against the pass, they've allowed the 3rd most pass yards on the season. They should get shredded by Jameis in the revenge game. So we're firing him up this week in Superflex, even in single quarterback. Look for the ceiling game from Jameis Winston against his former team. The quarterback we're going to be sitting, unfortunately, is Jameis Winston. Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson versus the Jets. This game, and really this whole situation is just frustrating, right? We talked about it on my Wake and Take show. Make sure you check that out on Player Profiler Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. But Anthony Richardson should have never been benched, right? Like, he was already drafted without much experience at the college level, even at the high school level, hasn't really had much starter experience, and then gets injured his whole rookie season, essentially, right? He's a developmental prospect, and they knew that when they drafted him, and they're taking development away from him. So it just never really made any sense. And then Joe Flacco wasn't even playing that well. They should have pulled him, last week maybe, or just kept going with it, maybe at least not this week, because the Jets defense is just a total confidence killer. Like, how are you going to have him sit for a couple weeks so he can build up his confidence, take some mental reps, and then send him out against one of the top pass defenses in the league? It's going to be hard on him. I mean, luckily, he might be able to get some points done on the ground, but we actually haven't even seen much rushing performance from Anthony Richardson this year. He only has 1 rushing touchdown and doesn't have a single game with more than 60 rush yards yet. And the Jets defense is just good. And so I don't know. I think that this was a total bad call by the Colts organization to bench him and then bring him back against a tough defense. They should have at least maybe waited 1 more week or just not done it at all, because this is just ridiculous. Hopefully the couple game sitting was good enough and he is able to go out there and be the Anthony Richardson that we love, but I kind of doubt it this week. I would at least like to see him prove it first before I fire him up in single QB. In Superflex, you might not have an option, but in single QB, we're sitting Anthony Richardson this week. Just a tough matchup and a total confidence killer. At the running back position, we're firing up David Montgomery against the Jaguars. I mean, yeah, sure. If you have David Montgomery, you're probably going to fire him up anyway. But just in case, I want to throw him in here because this Jaguars defense is putrid. And the Lions are favored by 13.5 points, which always favors David Montgomery. The Jaguars have allowed the most yards on the season. And against the run, they are 6th in rush attempts allowed. They've allowed the 6th most rush attempts. They've allowed the 12th most rush yards and the 10th most rushing touchdowns on the season. They are being gashed in all facets of the game. And with this being a game where the Lions should be able to handle the Jaguars easily, we should get a ton of rushing opportunity from David Montgomery and hopefully a couple touchdowns. We're firing up against the soft Jaguars defense with a soft Jaguars offense. This should be a total blowout, which of course just favors Montgomery, who scored a touchdown in literally every game except for 2 this year. Just a total stud so far this season. Got to fire him up against this soft defense. The running back we're sitting is Aaron Jones against the Titans, and this is a tough one. The Titans defense is very hit or miss, but what I'm worried about with Aaron Jones here is that last week he did pick up that injury. He's less than 100%. He's been limited all week at practice. And then this Titans defense is really only bad as it comes to giving up touchdowns. And I just don't know if I want to bet on that. They could easily throw in Cam Akers or Ty Chandler with Aaron Jones being less than 100%. And even then, right, it could just be TJ Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, especially since they are a little bit better against the pass than they are the run. Aaron Jones over the last few weeks has struggled in scoring touchdowns, especially. Hasn't scored a touchdown in 3 weeks and has only scored a touchdown in 3 games so far this season. I think going up against a team who I don't like this matchup for Aaron Jones, especially being less than 100%. Essentially, they are second in yards allowed. This team, and against the run, they find themselves kind of middle of the pack. So this is kind of a health play for Aaron Jones. Tough defense against the run, tough defense against the pass too. I just don't expect a lot of points to be scored really in this game. I mean, it really just comes down to Will Levis. The only reason they're giving up points is because of turnovers. This defense is actually pretty solid, pretty stout. And so I would be staying away from a less than 100% Aaron Jones in this matchup. At wide receiver, we're firing up Jaxon Smith-Njigba against the San Francisco 49ers. Yeah, DK Metcalf is back, but I am not so sure that he's 100%. And DK Metcalf kind of historically struggles against the 49ers. He does get some targets. They did feed him earlier this year, but it just never really translates into fantasy points. Jaxon Smith-Njigba has been unleashed. If you look over the last few weeks especially, you can see it, but especially heading into the bye week, week 9, he had 13 targets, brought in 7 of them for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns, was the wide receiver 1 on the week. He had that 16 target game all the way back in week 2 as well, and that was with DK Metcalf in the game. Jaxon Smith-Njigba can get a ton of volume. And in a divisional shootout against the San Francisco 49ers, I like this game a lot for JSN. Finally unleashed in this offense. And with DK Metcalf coming back at less than 100%, I think that DK Metcalf will actually end up just kind of taking away some coverage, leaving the door open for JSN to have another spike week against their divisional opponent. Fire up JSN. And we're getting bold with our wide receiver sits. We're going to sit Drake London against the Broncos, and this is just a Pat Surtain play. Patrick Surtain is just killing it so far this year. He has the 3rd highest shadow rate, which means he's going to be following Drake London most of the game. And he's only allowing 2 receptions a game. He's only allowing an average of 1.9 yards per separation, which is 83rd. He's only allowing a 15.4 points per game. Sorry, yards per game. 15.4 yards per game. Only allowing 7.7 yards per reception, has only allowed 1 touchdown on the season, and has 3 interceptions. This is just a tough matchup for Drake London. And so I'm not betting on him this game. We'll talk about it a little bit later when we get to the flex positions, but I think that this is a Darnell Mooney or a Kyle Pitts game. I think that this is just too tough of a matchup for Drake London, that the Falcons will be looking elsewhere to find their points. The Broncos are a top 5 defense, and Patrick Surtain is one of the best lockdown corners in the game, sitting Drake London against the Broncos. At tight end, this is always the toughest. I mean, it's just such a shallow position. You kind of have to just hope and pray. But there is one tight end this week that makes this a little bit easier, and it's Dawson Knox. There's no Dalton Kincaid, which means you can fire up Dawson Knox with confidence. Not only is Dalton Kincaid out leading to some more volume for Dawson Knox at the tight end position, they're also playing the Chiefs, which should not only be a shootout, but the Chiefs are giving up the most yards per game to tight ends across the league. So this is a soft matchup for him, as well as a shootout where tons of points should be scored, and there is no Dalton Kincaid. This should be a huge game for Dawson Knox, at least in terms of tight end scoring. He should hopefully at least get you there to 10. He's available in a lot of leagues. I would recommend picking him up and streaming him this week against the Chiefs. And the tight end we're sitting is Pat Freiermuth against the Ravens. I just think George Pickens keeps getting it done, right? The Ravens secondary is not good, which generally does kind of open the door for a tight end to succeed. The Ravens aren't good against tight ends, but Pat Freiermuth is just not getting volume. Russell Wilson is basically only throwing it to George Pickens, and now has a second George Pickens to throw it to in Mike Williams. So a guy that hasn't had more than 3 targets since week 4 is someone you shouldn't be starting really ever. So I'm just benching Pat Freiermuth. I think that George Pickens will be able to shred this Ravens secondary enough to where Pat Freiermuth just won't get it done. Now, if he gets a touchdown, that's what you're hoping for, right? He's only going to get 3 to 4 targets here. If he gets a touchdown, he'll be there. I don't want to bet on it. I don't like the volume that he's getting. I don't really like the matchup. And I think the Steelers will be able to go with George Pickens. And now we've made it to our 3 flex plays. I'll keep this short. These are generally based on game script, gut feel. matchup. Nothing too crazy here. These are your flex plays. You're just really looking for high scoring games or potential volume. So as mentioned, with Drake London probably being locked down by Patrick Surtain, that should open up the field for Darnell Mooney. He did have that injury scare earlier this week, but he's off the injury report. And I just think if the Falcons are to score points in this game, they're going to have to use their ancillary pieces. I think Darnell Mooney keeps getting it done. He's been getting a ton of volume all season anyway. So I just want to keep going back to him, especially in a game where Drake London should get some really, really tight coverage. I think Darnell Mooney is going to be asked to step up this week. So I want to fire him up against the Broncos. And hey, we talked about starting Jameis Winston in the revenge game against a bad Saints secondary. Why not go even further and say flex Cedric Tillman? At this point, people are probably locking him into their rosters, but he still qualifies as a flex. This is an easy matchup for Cedric Tillman. And of course, an easy matchup for Jameis Winston with the revenge game narrative. If Jameis Winston's going to have a good game, so are his weapons. So we're firing up Cedric Tillman. And then just getting a little crazy here. Xavier Worthy has been awful the last few weeks. In fact, terrible. But I think this is a perfect game for him to bounce back against the Buffalo Bills. This should be a high-scoring contest, and Xavier Worthy and the Chiefs should have some creative plays designed and utilized to get the ball in this speedster's hand. I'm calling a Xavier Worthy touchdown this week against Buffalo. It's an easy matchup with tons of points expected to be scored in this one. I want to fire up any Chief and Buffalo Bill I have. That even extends to Xavier Worthy, who will be flexing. And that will do it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, checking out my Start Sit episode. Everyone have a fantastic day, fantastic weekend, and good luck in Week 11. Peace.